Hi everyone, Gundam Pixy here for a 25th and brand new episode of our special edition Lore of the Universal Century. Today, we're going back again to the 1 Year War era in an attempt to answer a particular question, which is... Yep, in this video, we are going to explore the history of the anorexic Gundam, its mechanical lore, variants, and extract every bit of mechanical knowledge we have on them so far. But let's start by the beginning. What is exactly the Gundam Pixy? Codename Eric78XX, the Gundam Pixy, also called Elf Gundam, was a high-performance close combat ground mobile suit fielded by the Earth Federation forces during the 1 Year War. Secretly created as part of the G4 project, the Pixy was, alongside the Gundam Alex, the Gundiver, and the GT4, part of this development plan which aimed to provide a tactical Gundam to each branches of the Federation forces, being in the Pixy case, the contribution meant for the Earth Federation ground forces. A machine directly developed from the Eric7802, aka the original Gundam, the Pixy accentuated its predecessor already impressive close-range abilities, instead choosing to specialize in ground combat only. To achieve this, the Pixy discarded both the core block system and the space-use features of the Eric7802, which resulted in a decrease of weight of almost 3 tons and a half, making the Pixy way more lightweight and agile as a result. In addition to this, the Pixy mounted a new generator with a drastically enhanced power output, enabling the Gundam power cables to quickly deliver the energy needed to the limbs, and thus making the machine responsiveness second to no other mobile suit at that time, at least on Earth. To take advantage of all this agility and responsiveness, the Pixy arsenal was also modified, replacing the beam sabers by a pair of beam daggers, which were weapons with a shorter reach but higher cutting and penetrating capacity. As primary range weapons, the Pixy would instead rely on a pair of 90mm short machine guns, rather ineffective weapons in long-range combat but extremely deadly and useful once the enemy entered close-range combat. One of the other most unknown abilities of the Gundam Pixy was a special feature named the Beam Stealth Coat, which capacities were never fully detailed. This coating is named the Beam Invisibility Cloak by Japanese sources, so we can deduce it enabled the Pixy to turn invisible like the Black Rider, and that this was achieved through Minovsky particle and beam technology. Now, since the invisibility cloak was strangely never used in any of the Pixy combats, it is also possible the technology ended up being a failure and unusable, hence why it wasn't much used. Despite this, the Pixy remained a terrifying threat, being far more deadly than most Xeon close-range mobile suits, including the Goof, which the Pixy completely outperformed with its agility. Nonetheless, the qualities of the Pixy didn't sadly make up for its weaknesses. Because of the slim armor frame and general design, the Pixy was not just very agile, it was also very vulnerable and hampered by its low defenses. This was even more accentuated by the fact that the Pixy became deadly only once it entered close-range combat, and that keeping it in long-range combat would negate all its assets. Then, landing 1 or 2 direct hits would be enough to bring down this low defense Gundam, making the Pixy essentially a glass cannon which only worked in close range combat. Nonetheless, the Pixy would innovate the ways of mobile suit combat and would influence many future machines, notably the J-Gun and its ability to switch the beam saber in a beam dagger. But that's enough setting for today. Let's get to our lore. The year is Universal Century 79, and the 1 Year War was entering its final phase. At that time, the Earth Federation had officially started rolling out mobile suits, with the infamous Eric7802 entering service in September, followed by its siblings of the V project aboard the White Base. Before the events of Site 7, the Earth Federation ground forces had already mobile suits in their sleeves, notably the Ground Gundam and Ground Jim, present on the front line since July UC-79. This was mainly due to the fact that until November UC-79, the Gravity Front had been the main stage of the war, with the ground forces facing the bulk of Zeon mechanical arsenal, thus explaining why they received mobile suits first. Now, this required preferential treatment for the ground force caused internal tensions, with notably the Earth Federation Space Force demanding the start of the Pale Rider project, which eventually empowered the Space Force, but also the ground force since the Red, Black and White Riders eventually fell under its jurisdiction. Still, as early as October UC-79, the Federation top brass realized this had caused a rift between the four branches of the Federation, with the Navy and Air Forces seriously lagging behind the ground and space forces, being most of the time left to fend off with conventional weapons or poorly performing mobile suits. To balance this, the senior officers eventually decided to establish a new development plan, which would provide a new tactical weapon to each branches of the Federation depending on their needs. This idea eventually evolved into a project known as the G4, which aimed to create 4 Gundams for the 4 different branches of the army. For the Space Force, the project would create a high-mobility Gundam, responsive enough to be piloted by the new breed of new type soldiers emerging, the Gundam Alex. For the naval forces, the gift would instead be a next-generation amphibious mobile suit, with a new kind of polarized waterproof beam rifle, the Gundiver. For the air forces, the new asset would be the perfect hybrid between mobile suit and aircraft, the forefather of all transformable mobile suits, the GT-4. For the ground forces, which would soon start Operation Odessa, the project would instead provide a nimble and agile land combat specialist, capable of facing the latest Zeon ground mobile suits, the Gundam Pixy. Now, before each of these 4 machines could be created, the G4 project underwent a demonstration phase, where early versions of each machines would be created and then validated as tactical demonstrators. For the Alex, this came in the form of the G4, a non-combat mobile suit also tested by Christina McKenzie. For the GT4, the early variant was the GT4 test type, a limbless monster with poor combat capacity. For the Gundiver, a slightly different pre-production variant lacking the polarized beam rifle was presented, named Aqua Gundam. In the case of the Gundam Pixy, this early version came in the form of a machine which would be remembered as the Gundam Pixy initial deployment type. Almost identical to its future sibling child Pixy units, the initial deployment type didn't bore any significant differences with the normal Pixy model, save for its signature silver paint scheme. Internally, the initial type followed the same trope, with the only difference residing in its OS being completely blank of any combat data. If you think this isn't something too important, well, you would be completely wrong. In the original series, Amuro's lack of combat data about the goof, paired with his own miscalculations, result in a poor performance against Rumble Roll mobile suits, which means the initial Pixy dramatically needed to fill its own OS to be able to perform correctly, and sadly, this would need to happen through trial and error. In October UC-79, the initial Pixy was dispatched to the North American front, being assigned in mid-November to Lilith Aiden of the Witch Hunt Squadron, tasked to hunt down the noisy ferret team. In Aiden's hands, the initial Pixy would sit combat for the first time, but despite its performance, no mobile suit nor pilot would be enough to bring down the all-female Zeon squadrons to its knees. With the initial Pixy proving not enough to complete the mission, Lilith asked the Admiralty to be granted the customization of her Pixy and have it converted into a customized version to fit her combat style. Surprisingly, the request was granted, and the field engineers immediately started refitting the initial type, following Lilith's personal directives, resulting in the transformation of the initial type into the Gundam Pixy Lilith Aiden Custom. A custom ace unit, the Lilith Aiden Custom was a special mobile suit, inheriting the Pixy taste for close-range warfare while introducing new features and modifications, meant not just to fit Lilith's personal taste, but also to fix some design flaws she had witnessed in the initial type. First, Lilith correctly realized that the Pixy was a glass cannon, which clearly lacked defenses, and thus requested the armoring of the suit to be upgraded with new parts made of Luna titanium. This increased the weight of the suit, and to keep the mobility intact, a new propulsion system had to be installed, with new rear leg thrusters being added to the Pixy. Thrusters which would serve as the basis for the prototype version of the Gem Sniper 2 own thrusters. In terms of weapons, Lilith rebooted pretty much everything, discarding the pair of beam daggers she deemed too risky to use for a more versatile twin beam spear, a weapon with a longer reach which was borrowed from the Gem Striker, and which she used on her old Gem Ground type. Combined with the added armor, this would enable the new Pixy to enter close combat while being able to tank few hits and while keeping the enemy not too close with the twin beam spear. In addition, a supplementary regular beam saber was mounted in the design if Lilith was ever to lose the spear and would want to continue close range combat. Similarly, the 90mm short machine guns were thrown away, being instead replaced by a Gem Command beam gun and a Balzac bazooka, which extended the versatility of the Pixy as it could now serve as a mid-range fighter if need be. Aside the armor, a short shield, similar to the one used by the full armor Gundam, was added to expand the unit defensive sphere. Ice on the cake, Lilith chose to repaint the mobile suits in a reddish color scheme, which were their signature colors. With her new mobile suit, Lilith would continue to chase the nosy Fairy Squadron, and also the Pixy would be extensively damaged by the Team's Titania. The enhanced Red Pixy would go on to survive the war, being the suit who avoided Renato Jeremy from breaking the ceasefire at the California base in December UC-79. But let's go back to October UC-79. With the initial type being completed and the Lilith custom being only a distant dream at that time, the Earth Federation Ground Force top brass, satisfied by the initial type design, decided to finally launch the Pixy official production. Based on the initial type, 3 identical Pixy units were manufactured, and upon completion, it was immediately decided that these 3 units would be dispatched to every corner of Earth in an attempt to change the tide of the different gravity fronts with these new tactical Gundams. The first completed unit, named Unit 1, was assigned to the Belfast base and was supposed to serve as a frontline breaker for Operation Odessa, being meant to serve in the assault on the western side of Europe. After 1 month sitting comfortably in the base, the Pixy finally joined the fight in November UC-79 and was transferred to the front line for Operation Odessa First Assault. However, at that time, the Panel Battalion/Black Ops Division of the Slave Reef, assigned to the Earth Federation Ground Forces, became aware of the Pixy Unit 1 transfer from Belfast to the European front, and using the expertise of their hacker, Doris Brent, they rerouted the transport, having the Pixy delivered to them instead of the regular forces. Subsequently, Unit 1 was assigned to Fred Reber, the close-range specialist of the Slave Reef, and was repainted in the team greyish colors. Reber immediately abandoned the 90mm short machine guns instead decided to opt for a single traditional 90mm bootloop machine gun, which was a weapon more effective in long-range combat. In front ends, Unit 1 appeared in the front line for the first time during an assault on a Zion base near the Doven Sea coast. There, the Pixy proved its worth by tearing apart the Defender mobile suits, until it ran against a special Zion mobile suit, the custom Ifrit of Zion trainer Duke Schneid. In the midst of their duel, however, the Slave Reef successfully bombed the base, defeating the Zion forces and clearing the way for the big trace land ships of the regular forces to advance. From there, Pixy and Ifrit would become rival suits and would duel on numerous occasions during the remaining month. In mid-December UC-79, the Slave Reef, disgraced and hunted down by their former employers, joined force with Duke Schneid and the rest of his Zion team, in an effort to provide an escape for both squads, former enemies turned situational allies. During this battle, Schneid and Reber switched their mobile suits, and while Schneid eventually passed away inside the Pixy after buying time for everyone to escape, Reber would continue using his former nemesis Ifrit, even as late as UC-96, where he had joined Neo-Zion remnants. After this fight, the unit was recaptured by the Federation and later reacquired by Doris Brandt through his usual hacking method. Brandt would use the Pixy during the assault against the Augusta Institute, but eventually disappeared alongside the Gundam. What became of the Grey Pixy is a mystery, only for future side story writers to fill the blank. Someday. But let's go back to the two other units. In early October, as Unit 1 was dispatched to the Belfast base, the second Pixy of the line, Unit 2, was instead transferred to the East Asian front, being planned to be delivered to the Eastern forces in preparation for Operation Odessa. At that time, Lieutenant General Revel, Chief Commander of the Earth Federation Ground Forces and a strong advocate of the Pixy project, could voice of the White Base streak of successes on the ground front, notably thanks to their rising ace pilot, Amuro Ray and his Eric 7802 Gundam. With the White Base being ordered to ram the Zion east side defenses for Operation Odessa, Revel devised a plan to have the new Pixy delivered to the experimental corps and being assigned to Amuro to give him a more ground-adequate mobile suit. With this, the Albatros Transport Group was formed, a transport squadron of the Special Forces which was supposed to escort the Pixy and make sure it arrived safely to the White Base. The Albatros Corps was made of 2 platoons, boarding a single Medea and 6 gun cannons. By October 9th, the Albatros Corps, harassed by enemy Zion forces, had lost one of their 2 platoons, but steadily proceeded in enemy-controlled territory. A few days later, the Pixy and the surviving escorts were able to make it to a friendly base in the Gobi Desert, but in a twisted turn of events, Zion elite team of the 17th Mobile Suit Platoon, named Wolfgar Unit, came across the base while looking to loot supplies, and discovered the Pixy there. This caused Zion to engage Operation Desert Dragon, a special operation similar to Operation Rubicon of War in the Pocket, with the objective being to either capture or destroy the Federal New Gundam. With the rates of the Wolfguard team increasing daily, the captain of the Albatros Corps, Bork Cry, desperately asked his superior Noctigadis to be granted use of the Pixy, as it was their best asset at that time. Although the arrogant high officer refused multiple times, he eventually granted Bork his request after the young pilot started licking his boots and swallowing his pride. With the Pixy, Bork turned the tide of the raids, which caused Zion to focus even more and more of their forces on the tiny Federation base. By October 19th, the top brass of the base decided to cowardly evacuate, and even abandoned Borkroy and his Pixy, hoping to save their own skin from the unbearable Zion assaults. Alone and left to fend off legions of Zion mobile suits, Bork and his Pixie stood an entire night, eventually facing the top pilot of the Wolfguard team, Henry Boone, and his Ifrit at dawn. In the end, the Pixie vanquished the Ifrit, but fell on the ground itself, defeated. Yet, while Operation Desert Dragon seemed a victory for the Zeon side as the Pixie was put down, it eventually proved a disaster for Zeon. First, the Pixie performance and Zeon's stubbornness in trying to destroy it had costed the Zeon East Asian front not just countless pilots, but also many experienced soldiers like Henry Boone. This meant that after this, the Federation forces literally rammed Zeon defense line from the east without any difficulty, which means that unlike the Western campaign, which was bloody, the Eastern campaign of Operation Odessa proceeded rather smoothly for the Federation forces. Secondly, the Pixie had fallen, yes, but Borkrai had survived with the Pixie data, which meant that the Federation had still gained invaluable combat data. Worse? Well, the Pixie actually survived the encounter, being buried under the sand by Bork and recovered the following morning by Federation allied forces, which meant Operation Desert Dragon was not a Pyrrhic victory as it seemed, but a total disaster. The Pixie Unit 2 surviving, an addition from the Missing Link game, actually caused many to believe the unit hijacked by the Slave Reef was not Unit 1, but rather a repaired Unit 2. However, the Pixie Unit 2 would only have alpha amounts of repair available before being stolen by the Black Ops unit, which tend to confirm they instead hijacked Unit 1. Now about Unit 3. As Unit 1 and Unit 2 were respectively dispatched to the Western and Eastern fronts, the Federation top brass took the decision to assign the 3rd Pixie unit to another important theater of the war, the Southern Front, which resulted in Unit 3 being shipped off in Africa. There, Unit 3 changed its original Gundam paint scheme for a more practical greyish and greenish color scheme, which offered a better camouflage for local warfare. In December UC-79, Lieutenant General Wayne, one of the top officers of the Earth Federation ground forces, started a global conspiracy meant to prolong the war on Earth and which aimed to make sure the Earth Federation ground forces wouldn't fall behind the Space Force, remaining the branch which would reap the more influence and spoils after the war ended on their terms. To make sure nobody tried to interfere with his plans, Wayne had the Pixie Unit 3 transferred from Africa to the North American front, and had the close-range Gundam being assigned to his Black Ops special cleaner, Lieutenant Cortez. A complete sadist and psychopathic soldier, Cortez couldn't down anyone trying to stick their nose in Wayne's plan, using his exceptional piloting skills to cut Federation and Zeon mobile suits alike. Cortez would then customize the machine, having the green and grey color scheme repainted in grey, white and a darker, almost black tone of green. In the final stage of the manga, where Federation hooligans, Cortez and the Pixie Unit 3 would face the entire Sleipnir and Nemesis squads, composed of a Gun Cannon 2, a Gun Tank 2, a Gym Sniper 2, a Gym Light Armor and a Gym Type C. Against all odds, Cortez and the Pixie massacred the entire group of rather experienced soldiers, only losing one camera eye and an arm in the process. Then, Cortez would confront the protagonist Yuji Arcana and fistfight his Gym Striker with the Scarecrow Pixie, until Yuji managed to kill Cortez with a daring punch to the Pixie cockpit. Thus ended the life of the Pixie Unit 3, aka the evil one of the lot, although it managed to go out like a badass. Before we end this video, it's important to mention that while the Pixie discarded the core block system, it seemed to have retained the capacity to dock with the G-Fighter parts, the Pixie Unit 3 being shown in a G-Armor mode. Wherever this implied the Pixie could still use the G-Ball and the G-Sky modes is still unknown, and also I personally think not. In the end, it will depend on your own headcanon. And we have now completed today's topic, and I hope you will like it. This will be all for today's video, but stay tuned for future lore content delivered on the same channel. Hit the like button, and most importantly, comment and subscribe, as it will really help the channel to flourish. So long fellow new types, until the time of our next special edition.